Welcome to the Landscape Business AI podcast, the show for landscape and outdoor living business owners who are done being buried by admin, quotes and paperwork. I'm Nick Ruddle. I've spent nearly 20 years and over 10,000 hours coaching landscape businesses across the UK, and every episode I'm going to give you one real problem, one real story, and 3 things you can go and do this week to fix it. No fluff, no jargon, just what actually works. Let's get into it. The quote that got there first. You've had a good chat with a customer, stood on their patio, talked through what they want. They nodded along, seemed keen, said, "That sounds great, get us a quote over." You leave feeling confident. And then, nothing. A week later, they've gone with someone else. This happens to good landscapers constantly, and it's one of the most frustrating patterns in the industry because it's rarely about the quality of your work. In nearly 20 years of coaching landscape businesses, I've sat with owners who do beautiful work, have the reviews to prove it, and still lose jobs they should have won. 9 times out of 10, when we dig into why, it comes down to one thing: speed. Not because the customer necessarily wanted the cheapest option, or even the best one on paper, but because somebody else got a proper quote in front of them first, while you were still measuring up the next job, or fitting the calculation in after the kids were in bed. Here's the uncomfortable truth about how most people buy landscaping and outdoor living work. They don't wait around. They ask 2 or 3 companies for quotes, and whoever responds first, clearly and professionally, sets the benchmark everyone else gets compared to. If you take 5 days to turn around a quote and a competitor takes 2, you're not just late, you've lost control of the conversation before you've even sent a number. This isn't a sales skills problem. Most landscapers I work with are perfectly good at talking to customers face to face. It's a systems problem. The quoting process itself, measuring, costing materials, calculating labour, writing it up properly, takes hours you don't have, so it queues up behind the actual paid work, and by the time it's done, the moment has passed. 1 in 5. That was the close rate on quotes for a landscaper I work with. 15 years in the trade, superb reputation. Referrals coming in constantly, genuinely one of the best on the tools I'd come across. For someone with his quality and standing, that number should have been closer to 1 in 2, and neither of us could work out why at first. So we looked at his process. Here's what was actually happening. He'd visit a site, take some rough measurements on a notepad, maybe a few photos on his phone. Then that information would sit there, sometimes for days, until he had a quiet evening to sit down, work out the areas properly, price up materials, calculate labour, and put together a written quote. By the time it landed in the customer's inbox, anywhere from 4 days to 2 weeks had passed. Meanwhile, the customer had already had 2 other companies turn quotes around in 48 hours. Not necessarily better companies, not necessarily cheaper, just faster. And by the time his quote arrived, thorough and well priced as it was, the customer had often already made a decision, or at least formed a strong preference, based on whoever showed up first with a clear, professional number. What made this particularly painful was that his actual quotes, once they arrived, were good. Competitively priced, clearly laid out, professional. The work itself was never the problem. The gap between the site visit and the customer's inbox was the entire problem, and it was costing him, by his own rough estimate, once we worked it out together, somewhere in the region of £40,000 to £50,000 a year in lost work. Not because he wasn't good enough, because he wasn't fast enough. Once he saw that number in black and white, everything changed. He restructured his week so that measuring and quoting happened in a tight loop. Visit, measure, price, send, rather than being something that got pushed to the evenings. His close rate climbed within a couple of months, not because he changed a single thing about the quality of his work, but because he stopped losing jobs to timing alone. 1. Quote, while the enthusiasm is still hot. There's a narrow window right after a site visit where the customer is at their most engaged. They've pictured the finished garden, they're excited, they're ready to say yes. Every day that passes after that visit, that enthusiasm cools, and other quotes start arriving to compete for their attention. Aim to have a quote in front of a serious inquiry within 24 to 48 hours of the site visit, not the end of the week. If your current process genuinely can't hit that because of how much manual calculation is involved, that's not a discipline problem, it's a process problem, and it's worth mapping out exactly where the time goes, measuring, pricing, writing up, so you know which part to fix first. This is precisely where the Landscape Business AI Assistant changes what's realistic. Upload the site drawing and it reads the scale, extracts the measurements and works out quantities in minutes, the exact bottleneck that usually pushes a quote from same day to next week. 2. Consistency beats memory every time. If your pricing lives in your head or varies slightly depending on which notepad you scribbled it in, you will underquote some jobs and overquote others, and you'll never quite know which. Build yourself a simple, repeatable pricing structure, a rate per square metre for different types of work, a standard day rate for labour, a consistent materials markup so that every quote starts from the same foundation rather than being reinvented from scratch each time. The mistake I see most often here is talented landscapers treating every quote as a bespoke exercise in mental arithmetic. That's exhausting, it's slow, and it's where the 4-day delay usually comes from. A consistent structure doesn't make your quotes generic, it makes them fast and accurate, which frees you up to spend your actual thinking time on the parts that need it, like design and specification. The Landscape Business AI Assistant applies your rate card and markup rules automatically to every quote, so whoever's producing it, you or an estimator, starts from the exact same foundation every time, rather than reinventing the pricing logic from scratch. 3. Professional presentation signals trust before a single word is spoken. 2 quotes can contain identical pricing and win completely different reactions from a customer, purely based on how they look. A scrappy handwritten figure on a compliment slip creates doubt, even subconsciously, about how organised the rest of the job will be. A clean, clearly laid out professional document does the opposite. It tells the customer, before they've even called you, that this is a business that has its act together. This matters more in outdoor living and landscaping than almost any other trade, because customers are handing over a serious sum of money for something they can't fully picture yet. Anything that builds confidence in your professionalism before the job even starts is doing real commercial work for you, and it costs you nothing extra to get right, just consistency in how every quote is formatted and presented. Every quote produced through the Landscape Business AI Assistant comes out fully formatted and consistent by default, so that professional first impression is simply built in, not something you have to remember to get right under pressure. Here's what ties all 3 of those together. Speed, consistency, and professional presentation all depend on the same thing. A proper system sitting behind your quoting process rather than everything living in your head or on scraps of paper across different jobs. This is precisely where AI has changed what's realistic for a small landscaping business. Reading a site drawing, extracting the measurements, applying your rates, work that used to take hours can now happen in minutes, while the enthusiasm from that site visit is still hot. What that business I told you about actually needed was a company operating system. One place where measurements, pricing and quote templates all live, so that turning a site visit into a professional quote takes minutes rather than evenings, whether you're stood on site with a tablet or back at the office. That's it for this episode. If you're finding this useful, hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss the next one. Here's the thing I want you to remember. Every hour you save on paperwork and quoting is an hour back with your family. That's the real return. Not the software, not the systems, the life you get back. What you've heard today is just one piece of it. The Landscape Business AI Assistant does exactly this kind of thing across every part of your business: sales, marketing, operations, recruitment, strategic alliances and finance, all in one place, built specifically for landscape and outdoor living businesses. If you want to see it for yourself, go to assistant.landscapebusinessmastery.com and watch it work. And if you'd like some help beyond the software, one-to-one coaching or team leader and manager training for your business, head to nickruddle.com. Both links are in the show notes too. I'm Nick Ruddle. See you next time.